The signal was coming from inside the ship. Deck 7. Section C. We'd been alone out here for 11 months, and something was transmitting from a storage room that had no power. I was staring at the console when the ping registered, and for maybe 3 seconds I tried to convince myself it was a malfunction, that the scanner had looped back on itself somehow, that 15 years of training hadn't just become completely worthless. But the signature was clear. Active transmission. And we'd been alone out here for 11 months. The Helix was carrying 4,000 frozen colonists and a skeleton crew of 32. We were 11 months into a journey so deep that Earth's sun had disappeared into the background noise of every other star. Out here, silence wasn't peaceful. It was a wait. The hum of the reactor becomes your heartbeat. The recycled air tastes like memory. You start talking to yourself because the alternative is forgetting what your voice sounds like. Most of the crew had stopped using their real names by month 6. Call signs only. It was easier. Less personal. Less weight when someone didn't make it. I'd been working a double shift because Cade was still in medical. Something about his blood work came back wrong 3 days ago, and Dr. Voss wanted him under observation. Not quarantine. Just observation. That's what she kept saying. But she wouldn't let him leave the med bay, and she wouldn't tell the rest of us what she'd found. I didn't push. On a ship like this, you learn when to stop asking questions. The signal pinged again. Same location. Same frequency. I brought up the internal grid and cross-referenced the source point with the crew manifest. Section C on Deck 7 was a storage junction. 16 cubic meters of backup components and emergency rations. No terminals. No comms. No reason for anything in there to be transmitting anything at all. I should have called it in. Protocol was absolute. But I was tired, and I told myself it was just another glitch. That decision is why I'm the only one left. The corridors were too bright. They always were during third shift. The lighting system compensated for crew fatigue by cranking up the lumens, and it gave everything this bleached, overexposed look, like you were walking through a photograph instead of a place. My footsteps echoed. I passed the cryo banks on Deck 4 and heard the low mechanical wheeze of the cooling systems. 4,000 people locked in chemical suspension, dreaming or not dreaming, their lives reduced to data points on a screen. Sometimes I wondered what they saw in there. If they were aware. If some part of them knew they were boxed and frozen and hurtling through a void that didn't care if they lived or died. Deck 7 was colder. The heating grid had been acting up for weeks, and engineering kept pushing the repairs back because there were always more critical systems failing. I could see my breath. The lights flickered once as I passed Junction 12, and I stopped, waiting for them to stabilize. When they did, I kept moving. Section C was behind a maintenance hatch that required 2 authentication checks. I pressed my palm to the scanner and felt the needle prick for blood confirmation. The door hissed open. Inside, the storage space was exactly what it was supposed to be. Crates stacked in rows. Industrial shelving. Everything labeled and logged. No movement. No sound. I stepped inside and pulled up my handheld scanner, sweeping the room for active signals. Nothing. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The ping had been clear. Precise. No ambiguity. But there was nothing here. I ran a second scan. Then a third. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed the crate in the back corner. It was the same as all the others. Standard issue. Magnetic seal. But the dust on top of it was disturbed. Not much. Just a thin line along the edge, like something had been dragged across it. I walked over and checked the manifest code stamped on the side. Medical supplies. Logged 11 months ago during final loading. I broke the seal and opened it. Inside were vials. Hundreds of them. Small glass cylinders filled with something dark and viscous, almost black. No labels. No identification codes. I picked one up and held it to the light. The liquid inside didn't move like liquid. It clung to the glass in threads, shifting slowly, almost deliberately. I put it back and closed the crate. My hands were shaking. I didn't know why. When I got back to my station, the signal was gone. I checked the logs. No record of it. No timestamp. Nothing. Like it had never existed. I sat there staring at the empty readout, trying to decide if I was losing my mind. Cade died that night. Voss called it a stroke. Sudden arterial failure. No warning. His body just stopped. She seemed calm when she told us. Too calm. Like she'd been expecting it. We burned him in the recycler the next day. That's what we did with the dead out here. You couldn't store them. Couldn't bury them. You broke them down into base components and fed them back into the system. Water, carbon, trace minerals. Cade became part of the ship. We all would, eventually. I started noticing things after that. Small things. Inconsistencies. The kind of details you wouldn't catch unless you were looking. The ventilation in Sector 9 would shut off for exactly 4 minutes every cycle. The lights in the mess hall flickered in sequence, left to right, always the same pattern. The handrail on the main stairwell was warm to the touch even though the heating grid was offline. I mentioned it to Chen, the engineer who worked the opposite shift from me. She looked at me like I'd just told her the ship was haunted. Maybe it was. 2 days later, another crew member went to medical. Rains. She collapsed during her shift in hydroponics. Seizures. Voss put her in isolation and wouldn't let anyone see her. When I asked what was wrong, she said they were running tests. When I asked what kind of tests, she told me to get back to work. I went back to Section C. The crate was gone. I checked the manifest. Still listed. Still logged. But the physical crate wasn't there. I searched the entire storage bay. Nothing. I pulled up the security feed for the section, but the timestamp I needed was corrupted. Just static and dead air. That night, I dreamt the cryopods were open. Empty. And at the end of the corridor stood something wearing Cade's face. It didn't move. Just stared. When I woke up, my pillow was soaked with blood from my nose. Rains died 3 days later. Same thing. Voss burned her without an autopsy. Said it was bad luck. 2 strokes in 1 week. Unlikely, but possible. When she said it, she wouldn't look me in the eye. I started watching the crew. They moved through their routines like actors. Same conversations. Same jokes. Word for word. Day after day. We weren't working anymore. We were performing. I went to the bridge and checked our position. We were still on course. Still moving. But when I pulled up the navigation logs, I saw something that made my stomach drop. We'd been decelerating. Not much. Just a fraction of a percent. But it had been happening for weeks, and no one had said anything. No alarms. No alerts. The ship was slowing down, and the system hadn't flagged it. I brought it up with Commander Oren. He was a granite block of a man, ex-military, the kind of person who made decisions in straight lines and didn't waste time on uncertainty. I told him about the deceleration. He pulled up the same logs I'd seen and stared at them for a long time. Then he said it was fine. Said the autopilot was compensating for drift. Said it was normal. But it wasn't normal. I knew it wasn't. And the way he looked at me when he said it, I knew he knew it too. That's when people started disappearing. Not dying. Disappearing. Jossel, one of the junior engineers, didn't show up for his shift. We checked his quarters. Empty. No personal items. No logs. It was like he'd never been there. I checked the crew manifest. His name was still listed. But when I tried to pull up his personnel file, it was blank. No photo. No history. Just a name and an employee number. 3 more vanished over the next week. Each time, the same thing. Empty quarters. Blank files. And no one seemed bothered by it. The remaining crew just adjusted their schedules and kept working. When I brought it up, they looked at me like I was speaking another language. Like I was the one who was confused. I started spending more time in the cryo banks. I don't know why. Maybe because they were the only ones who couldn't lie to me. 4,000 frozen faces, locked in their pods, unaware. I walked between the rows and checked the readouts. Life signs stable. Core temps normal. Everything was fine. Everything was always fine. Except for pod 1847. The readout was flickering between green and red. I ran a diagnostic. Nothing wrong. I moved closer and looked through the viewport. The woman inside was awake. Her eyes were tracking me. I stumbled back and hit an alarm, and security came running, and by the time we opened the pod she was gone. Not dead. Gone. The pod was empty. The harness was still locked. The seals were intact. But there was no body. No trace. Just an empty chamber and the faint smell of something chemical and wrong. Voss examined the pod. Said it was a systems error. Said the woman had never been there. Said the manifest had logged an empty pod by mistake. But I'd seen her. I'd seen her eyes. That's when I realized we weren't alone. Not in the way I'd thought. The signal wasn't coming from inside the ship because something had stowed away. It was coming from inside the ship because the ship had been changed. Modified. Rewritten. And we'd been so focused on surviving the journey that we hadn't noticed we were the cargo. I went back to Section C and found the crate again. It was in a different spot. Different code. But the vials were the same. I took one. Hid it in my jacket. Brought it to the only person I thought might help. Chen. She was in engineering, alone, running diagnostics on the reactor. I showed her the vial. Told her everything. She held it up to the light and watched the liquid move. Then she smiled. Not Chen's smile. Something else wearing her face. She opened her mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't human. Harmonic. Layered. A signal pretending to be a voice. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the bridge. Oren was there. He looked at me. He already knew what I was going to say. He told me to sit down. Told me it was over. Told me I was the last one who still remembered. I asked him what we were. He said we were seeds. The Helix wasn't a colony ship. It was a delivery system. The people in cryo weren't passengers. They were incubators. The vials I'd found weren't medical supplies. They were instructions. Genetic rewrites encoded in synthetic biology, designed to integrate into human cells during long-term suspension. By the time we reached the destination, the colonists wouldn't be human anymore. They'd be something new. Something engineered. And the crew was just another layer of the experiment. We were the control group. The ones meant to stay aware long enough to see it happen. Long enough to accept it. But some of us resisted. Some of us noticed. And when we did, the ship corrected us. Edited us. Removed us. Until only one remained. I asked why they needed even one. Oren leaned forward. His face was calm. Almost kind. He said every story needs a witness. I'm in my quarters now. The ship is still slowing. The cryobanks are online. The colonists are changing. The crew is gone. I'm recording this because Oren said every story needs a witness. The lights just flickered. Left to right. The same pattern. I think it's my turn.